Was there a reason for living?
No paradise is without its shadows. If we cannot accept this truth and learn from our pain, then our plight shall be repeated.
See this tale to a triumphant conclusion, and with elation in your hearts, bid the final curtain fall.
Endwalker is the end of Final Fantasy XIV's first saga, and I don't think it could have been much better. Final Fantasy XIV was released on September 30th, 2010 to a horrible reception, so it was destroyed, rebuilt from the ground up, and re-released on August 24th, 2013, slowly building its reputation to become one of the most popular MMOs ever, incorporating characters from every expansion, making the 4 previous stories matter even more than we initially thought, and on top of that, creating an ending that could lead towards endless possibilities of where the story of this fantastic game could go. And now that I have some distance from the game, it has given me some perspective about what I enjoyed about this expansion so much. In this video, I hope to convince you that Endwalker is an excellent end, starting with this story's main idea or theme. To live is to suffer, but suffering does not last forever, and there are reasons to keep going even in that duality. When Endwalker was initially released, I noticed that a lot of people were missing the point of the story, with comments like, "So I just have to accept that life sucks and deal with it," or when I saw a lot of people get to the final section of the Dead Ends dungeon, where they realized that the people on this planet had created a utopia where they solved every problem, even gaining immortality, but because they had nothing to strive for or struggle with, that perfection led them to boredom and stagnation, resulting in a society as a whole creating a monster called Rala to kill them and free everyone from their eternal boredom. I know some of you right now are saying that that's stupid, and to an extent I agree, but this section of the story accomplishes 3 things. 1, it gives you a super blatant example of having too much of a good thing can be a problem, like eating your favorite food every day, because no matter how much you love it, you're going to want to eat something else eventually. 2, it asks the question, which is that, is perfection worth pursuing? And most people would say yes. However, if we think about this question with a more critical eye, the answer becomes far more subjective and encourages debate because of people's own life experiences. They might feel as if some trouble or bad days in the past has helped make them the person they are today, or stop them from becoming the person that they wanted to be. And depending on if you like or hate yourself, the answer could be wildly different. Nevertheless, if I continue down this line of questioning, there's an infinite amount of things that can vary depending on one's lived experience. So let's move on. 3, it shows us a very clear example of what the Ascians would have become if Meteion never started the final days, with them wanting to perfect the star as Hermes talked about. Also considering that these unnamed people are wearing white robes and masks, looking like the mirror image of the Ascians, were supposed to see a similarity between them. Then there's the twist of Hydaelyn and Zodiark's true purpose. Back in Shadowbringers, the Scions find out that these gods of good and evil are actually the first primals to ever exist. But in Endwalker, their full story is revealed, leading to the biggest reveal over these 5 expansions, with Zodiark being sealed on the moon to hold back the true threat of Meteion and her sisters. Then there's Hydaelyn, not simply being a primal born of faith, praise, and aether, but actually the unsundered Ascian Vana, who intentionally made the people of the source weaker so they could harness the power of Dynamis in case they ever fought Meteion. And while Vana did this to help mankind, even she admitted that there was no kindness in what she did, even if she did it for a good reason. Playing into the theme of duality and balance once again, with all of the turmoil Vana put the planet through, led the continent of Eorzea and other nations to the early stages of a peaceful era, showing that without experience or knowledge of the sadness that comes with living, you'll never be able to truly appreciate how much of a reward peace and tranquility really are. And then there are so many great moments that reinforce these teachings, with Mastia being saved at the last moment by Estinian and Vitra, the warrior of light carrying the weight of the Scions' deaths into their final encounter with Meteion, only for them to be revived with the last of Hydaelyn's magic, and a few more here and there. But there is one scene that stood out above the rest for most people, which is the Sundering, a moment that has been talked about so many times, and depending on who's talking about the event, it was out of spite or necessity. However, now that we've seen this event in its totality, it was done out of desperation, with Vanad knowing what's to come and her pleading falling on deaf ears. So with no choice, she splits the world into 14 pieces and becomes the primal Hydaelyn to put mankind through endless trials to prepare for what awaits them at the end of this long journey. The scene was beautiful and I couldn't have asked for better. But enough about these great scenes, let's talk about something else, like some of my favorite characters in this expansion and the purpose they serve within the bigger narrative. Starting with the Scions, who have had significant character growth during their previous adventures. So by the time we get to Endwalker, we see how those past experiences have shaped them, meaning that most of the Scions don't get much development. If anything, the experiences that most of them go through solidifies their characters but shows us sides of them we've never seen, like Estinian becoming one of the main people who encouraged Vitra to reveal his true form to the people of Razatan, showing how much empathy he has since the events of Heavensward. Then there's Urianger, who's never really gotten to have a one-on-one with the Warrior of Light, and the few notable moments he has are all shared with the other characters like Moonbreeder's death and him ensuring Reen that Thancred doesn't hate her. But in Endwalker, I actually feel like I got to really know him, with Urianger explaining how much the decision of sending Menphilia to the First, how distant he was from Moonbreeder, and the many times he was forced to hold information from the other Scions weighed on his mind. However, the great thing about Endwalker, it shows how he has grown and how he deals with the Loporrits and faces Moonbreeder's parents directly, instead of lying or running away like he's done before. But moving on to someone a lot of people were never a fan of and never will be a fan of, Xenos. Admittedly, when he was introduced in Stormblood, his character completely fell off a cliff and to some people never recovered, but a few key changes to Xenos allows him to be his best self by the end of his journey. By freeing him from his obligation to Garlemald, it allowed him to be self-centered, which he always has been. That change allows Xenos to have one very clear goal, which is to have an all-out battle with his new strength against you. Yet there is more, with some insight about how Xenos actually thinks. He states to our heroes that he believes that everyone's reason for living can only be justified by them alone, and that whatever opinion someone has on their actions don't matter because those people will find a justification as to what they do in their life. But the last piece that completes Xenos is a reply from Alizé, where she explains that in order for Xenos to get what he desires, he needs to learn how to help others with what they want, because if he doesn't, he'll end up alone, never receiving the one thing he wants, which leads to him helping the Warrior of Light defeat the Endsinger. So by the end of his journey, Xenos leaves as an example of what the Warrior of Light could have been if he only cared about his own desires and was completely satisfied with how he lived his life, which I believe is very admirable, especially when thinking about the fact that Xenos' father was Varus and his grandfather was Emet-Selch. However, I can't end the video without talking about one of the Ascians, and while I could talk about the obvious choices like the iconic Emet-Selch, the wonderful Vanat, and the friendly Hythlodaeus, the one that stood out to me was Hermes. He is a character that I feel like has been completely overlooked. He's one of the most important characters in the lore, but he rarely gets any attention. In my personal opinion, Hermes is the most interesting among the Ascians due to his existential crisis within Paradise, constantly asking himself, is life worth living? In a world where he wants for nothing and is allowed to pursue what interests him, but with his life being overwhelmingly positive, it allows the bad things things to linger in his head, especially when it comes to his society discarding unworthy creations even if they're living beings. So when you combine his existential crisis, his inability to deal with negative emotions or experiences because of his inexperience, and lastly Hermes' empathetic bleeding heart, this leads him to dooming not only his entire planet but the universe as well, using the logic of the Asians, saying that if we're meant to survive, they'll figure it out, but if they can't, they should be discarded like their creations, because Hermes believes that life is suffering and nothing else. But through his countless reincarnations, seeing the many struggles of mankind and the lengths you will go to time and time again to save people, countries, and even entire worlds, Hermes begins to regret his past decisions, hoping that in his next life he'll be strong enough to face the pain and find a better answer with those around him, ending a character arc that seems to be one and the same as the meaning of this expansion. If you can't tell, I love Endwalker, and I want more people to experience it, but I won't act the game as perfect. But I do believe that it is the most casual friendly MMO out there, with me taking breaks upwards of 5 to 6 months at a time. I hope I've given some new people to the Final Fantasy franchise a reason to play this game. So with that being said, that's why Endwalker is an excellent end to Final Fantasy XIV's first saga, and I can't wait to see more. And if you enjoyed this video, like, comment, subscribe, and support my Patreon. It really helps me out. Also, if you want to see another video essay, that's on screen right now.